Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to express my deep gratitude to Ulrich Grabenwarter and his team and the European Investment Fund for the opportunity to talk to this illustrious audience, celebrating 30 years European Investment Fund, an institution that has been essential in the formation of my firm, Acton Capital, is a great opportunity to look ahead. I'm standing in front of you as an investor, co-founder of Acton Capital and the founder of the charitable Regenerate Forum. Being an investor satisfies my curiosity to understand how this world functions and what are the cycles that are driving its periods of disruption and transformation, be it economically, socially, or culturally. For this presentation, I was challenged to reflect upon the question, does our survival need a business case? As it implies, we're living at a decisive moment in human history. I strongly believe that if we continue on our current path, then our economic and financial systems run the risk of collapse. Climate change, the extinction of species, pandemics, increasing mental and chronic disease, an unsustainable distribution of wealth, populism, and institutional crisis point the way. So my answer to the question is yes, it needs a business case. And being an optimist, I believe this business case is right in front of us. But picking up on President Bill Clinton's famous quote, "It's the economy, stupid," this business case needs a radical shift in mind. And I need to disagree, Mr. President. It's not the economy, it's nature, stupid. Let's imagine for a moment a region in Europe we would like to invest in. We are in the year 2034. This beautiful old apple tree is in this region. The community here started 10 years ago to proactively respond to the challenges of climate change and started to think the regional economy from the soil up. They organized round tables of all stakeholders, farmers, foresters, business owners and artisans, politicians, artists, and scientists were brought together to create action plans for a healthy environment. This included working on soil health, biodiversity, clean water and air, regionally produced food and vibrant villages, and culture. They created resilient and cooling climate landscapes, interlinked by hundreds of kilometers of hedgerows, new biotopes, diversified forests, waterlogged moors, restored rivers, and streams, ponds, and lakes. The soils have become again rich in soil carbon and store a lot of water, while heavy rains quickly infiltrate and do no harm. Biodiversity has significantly increased, and all species threatened by extinction have returned. The farmers and foresters were the drivers of the transformation, which was financed by local businesses, waterworks, and consumers. Farmers and artisans provide fresh local food in regional supermarkets and stores and deliver directly to consumers' doorsteps. The organic food has become the basis for the meals in the local canteens and gastronomy. Children, students, and elderly in kindergartens, schools, universities, and retirement homes all manage eatable forest gardens. Universities, entrepreneurs, and startups work together, developing new technologies to further enhance this regenerative transformation. Businesses and farmers are closely networked, leading the way in implementing a circular regenerative economy. How many of you would like to invest with me in this region? And how many of you think, dream on, my friend? Before you decide, let's elevate our view on our planet Earth and let's try to understand what holds it alive and together. On April 12, 1961, I was 2 months old. Yuri Gagarin, Russian cosmonaut, was the first man to fly into space. When he saw the Earth from space, he said, "I see the Earth. It is so beautiful." few astronauts have been untouched by the sight. Some have encountered God. The experience of our planet as a borderless living whole and the fragility of its atmosphere, its blazing blue in the dark, deadly space, has touched these people deeply. Our planet can be divided into 3 spheres: the geosphere, the biosphere, and the human sphere. These spheres are embedded in the universal principles of life. And please understand, they build on each other. The biosphere cannot exist without the geosphere, and the human sphere cannot exist without the biosphere. To understand how these spheres emerged and interact, we need to go back 5 billion years. The geosphere emerged from a burning dust cloud. 4 billion years ago, the atmosphere consisted mainly of water, vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen. There was no oxygen. The Earth cooled and oceans formed as water vapor turned into rain. By providing all the inorganic elements and water, the geosphere created the conditions for emergence of life. So how did life and the biosphere emerge out of the geosphere, and what were the drivers? Basically, there are 3 forces who are at the center of this emergence. It is photosynthesis, the soil-carbon cycle, and the soil-water cycle, all drivers being deeply intertwined. Without constant energy supply, there would be no life on Earth. The Earth's energy comes from the sun. The essential building blocks of life on the planet are inorganic molecules, water and carbon dioxide. It is photosynthesis that converts sunlight into organic sugar by synthesizing water and carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen in the process. Let's look deeper into the engine room, into the soil carbon cycle. Between 30 to 50% of the sugar, the carbohydrates that a plant generates through photosynthesis, flow through its roots into the soil as a nutrient. This way, the plants feed the bacteria and the mycorrhizal fungi who transform the sugars into soil carbon, which is a key source of nutrients for soil life and plants. In return for the sugar, the mycorrhizal fungi provide nitrogen, phosphorus, and other essential nutrients such as zinc, magnesium, and copper to the plants. Giving and receiving. It is this symbiotic relationship between plants and soil that drives life on Earth. 95% of our food, feed, and organic raw materials originate from the soil. Soil is by far the most biologically diverse and most overlooked ecosystem on Earth. Soil contains a large variety of organisms which interact and contribute to the life force cycles. A spoon of healthy soil contains more living beings than humans on this planet. Living soils are made up of bacteria, multicellular organisms, worms, and insects in a vast fungal network. In many cultures, soil are referred to as the mother of all. In German, we call it Mutter Erde. The soil carbon creates numerous wins-wins. By transforming carbon dioxide, the greenhouse gas, into soil carbon, storing it long-term, it has huge potential to mitigate climate change. Soil is a sponge. The more soil carbon in the soil, the more water can be stored and infiltrate into the soil. Just remember the floods we just have in the south of Germany. The level of soil carbon correlates directly with the nutrition density of the food. And last but not least, a healthy soil biome determines plant health, animal health, and human health. The biome in our stomachs is related to the biome in the soils. Healthy soils feed healthy plants, feed healthy humans. And now let's look at the soil-water cycle. As mentioned before, carbon-rich soils store vast amounts of water, like a sponge. Much water is required in the process of photosynthesis. For each molecule of carbon dioxide fixed and each atom of oxygen released, several hundreds of water molecules are evaporated. Plants take up water from the soil through their roots, release it back into the atmosphere through leaf transpiration, and by doing so, they significantly contribute to the local moisture content. This is the natural cooling system of planet Earth. Healthy, biodiverse, and stratified forests have a vast leaf area, which translates into high transpiration rates. Contrary to what we tend to imagine, the amount of water released in the atmosphere by a forest normally is greater than the amount of water evaporated from the same area of the ocean. This creates a low-pressure zone over the forests that acts like a pump, sucking in moist air from the ocean into the continent, a process very well explained by the biotic pump theory. Forests are gigantic heat pumps mitigating heat. Trees of healthy forests also emit volatile organic condensation nuclei. These tiny particles suspended in the atmosphere together with airborne microorganisms enable cloud condensation. They literally help form rain droplets. With precipitation, the cycle starts all over again, maintaining the water flow and the cooling effect. Please realize, not water seeds plants, but plants seed water. We need to finally understand that the Earth is not a collection of some elements and some chemical processes, but a living organism. Photosynthesis is the respiration of this planet, transforming energy into nutrition. The soil carbon cycle is one heart chamber pumping carbon into the soil. And the soil water cycle is the other heart chamber, pumping minerals and water from the womb to feed the plants and regulate the climate on this planet. Yes, and the soil is the womb of life. The word human derives from humus. That's where we come from, and we go back dust to dust and soil to soil. And the rivers are the veins, and the groundwater are the arteries of this organism. That our planet is a living system is not a new idea. Gaia theory was developed in the 1960s by James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis. It states that the biosphere intertwined with the geosphere self-regulates the Earth's climate and the gas composition in the atmosphere in a way that allows life to flourish. This theory was for many years criticized by scientists, but in the last 20 years, more and more scientific evidence is backing Lovelock's and Margulis' theory. Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's hard to comprehend that this planet is a living organism. I hope that the following animations will help you to imagine how the heart chambers work. See how the process of photosynthesis is generating the heartbeat of life. What you see is how the photosynthesis is driving the soil carbon cycle over a year with the photosynthesis performance with the photosynthesis performance in the north, shrinking strongly in the wintertime, and the rainforests around the equator consistently performing photosynthesis and pumping carbon into the soils. The next simulation shows you the biotic pump of the soil water cycle at work over the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon rainforest is the heart of the continent, pumping far more water than the Amazon. Amazon River carries less water than is going through the flying rivers, huge streams of humidity in the atmosphere, which are diverted at the mountain region of the Andes into the south, there providing significant rainfall in the wealthiest region of South America, between São Paulo and Buenos Aires. You can also see how the Amazon rainforest is sucking in the humidity from the Atlantic, the biotic pump. The emergence of life on planet Earth is embedded into 4 universal principles of life. I'll touch on each. Emergence. When the parts of a system interact, new properties or structures are possible. Life is self-organizing, dynamic, and adaptive. The emergence of nature follows 2 design rules. First, it moves from the simple to the complex. We call this a holarchy. An atom is a holon, something that is simultaneously a whole as well as a part of a larger whole. The molecule could not exist without the atom, and the organism not without the cell, and humans not without the biosphere. This complexification is what we call evolution. While entropy governs thermodynamic transformation that releases energy at the expense of complexity, evolution is the counterforce, accumulating energy. We call this force syntropy. We can observe this syntropic complexification in the evolution of the biosphere. 3 billion years ago, it were cyanobacteria which introduced photosynthesis and transformed the atmosphere by releasing oxygen. Then the bacteria developed into multicellular beings out of which green algae emerged, the algae being the ancestors of all plants. To reach land, algae were able to establish relationships with the mycelium of the mycorrhiza fungi, which compensated for the missing roots. Through fungi and bacteria decomposing organic matter in rocks, soil emerged. The first roots evolved 400 million years ago, allowing plants to flourish. Animals evolved around the same time. First, insects, vertebrates, and reptiles, and later, mammals. Prehistoric humans appeared only 2 to 3 million years ago, and Homo sapiens 200 to 300,000 years ago. We emerged out of the biosphere. We are part of it. But be aware, it is the less complex organisms like bacteria, fungi, and plants who constitute 99.5% of the biomass weight on this planet. Humans only contribute 0.01% of the total biomass. Listen to the world-famous biologist Lynn Margulis on the role of bacteria. Now we unfortunately have no sound. The second design rule of emergence is that the evolution of life is following the same design patterns of all levels of existence, on all levels of existence. We call this fractality. A nerve cell, the mycelium of a fungi, the womb, and the structure of the universe all follow the same design pattern. The second principle of life is collaboration. This simply means that living things cooperate with each other and through numerous symbiotic relationships. Trees are not solitary creatures. They live in communities where mother trees supply weaker trees with nutrients via the mycorrhizal fungal network in the soil. This has been empirically proven. It is herbivores, animals who feed on plants that are pruning the prairies, savannas, and trees and forests on this planet. The pruning promotes new growth through photosynthesis, firing up the soil carbon cycle. It is then the predators, or what we call the key species, that are balancing the population of the herbivores so that the pruning does not harm the plants. And while you might not consider this relationship very collaborative, the only key species that has caused the extinction of species is man. Diversity. There are more than 8 million species of bacteria, fungi, plants, and animals. The more nodes a network has, the more connections the network has, the more ways the network has to adapt to change. So diversity creates resilience. Last is circularity. The living beings of the biosphere produce matter that feeds other beings. Nothing is wasted. Everything is recycled and returned to life. So the biosphere is intrinsically sustainable and does not produce anything that threatens the basis of life. So we must recognize that this place is a living organism, a web of life. Living beings are not separate species, but part of a mosaic that has emerged. the biosphere is deeply interconnected. We humans simply cannot exist without the part that came before us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move now, after we've spoken about the geosphere and the biosphere, let's now move to the human sphere. The human sphere emerged out of the biosphere. And the human sphere is basically our economy, our societies, our cultures. And the moment we built this human sphere, something very interesting happened. We went in complete separation to the biosphere over a long period of time. And the story was that separation, the oldest story about this separation is the expulsion from the paradise. And if you read the Bible, the paradise was on planet Earth. It was then the church in the medieval ages who transcended the paradise into the heaven, and on earth was hell, and everybody wanted to get up there, but that was a further step in separation. And it was then in the age of enlightenment when brilliant people like Isaac Newton, who discovered the mechanical laws of physics, and René Descartes actually introduced a notion of looking at the whole living system with a mechanical view. Descartes was a very religious person, and he wanted to prove that the soul is connected to our body. The soul he considered to be of having eternal life, and he couldn't prove it. So in the end, he came to the conclusion that the body is just a machine. And today, I think, in no moment of human history have we been as disconnected from the living system as we are now. The human sphere is also run by certain principles, and surprise, surprise, these principles are 180 degrees contrarian to the living principles of life. We have a reductionist view at life. We think we can manipulate it, we can reorganize it, we can dominate it. We think that competition instead of collaboration is really the way to move forward. We think that this is a much better way of organizing life, the monoculture. And by the way, we don't do this only in agriculture. We do this also on our financial markets. If you're a conglomerate, you have to accept a discount because that's what we call the conglomerate discount. So the resilience is not really valued by our markets. And our systems are linear. We take, we produce, and we dump. And if you think this further and think about the pillars of this extractive economy which we have created, have a look at this picture. What you see on the left is a rainforest, and then you see a palm oil plantation, and then you see housing. The interesting thing is the rainforest doesn't appear in our accounting. Only once we cut the rainforest and we turn it into a palm oil plantation, actually it appears in our accounting, be it on a company level or be it on a GDP level. And the interesting thing is if you cut the palm oil plantation and build houses on this, you actually generate more GDP, but nobody accounts for what has happened to the living system. And then we have this great leverage effect, which we all love, particularly the large PE companies. And if you think about that, this leverage effect is basically like throwing gas into the fire if the system behind it is extractive. And we have laws and regulations. We actually have far too many of them. We're drowning in bureaucracy. When I heard about the European Green Deal, I thought, what a brilliant mind has created that. Finally, we're touching upon the right points. Finally, we're moving into a regenerative economy. But we have created tons of rules and regulations and constrictions. And I'm not blaming the politicians for that. I'm not blaming the commission for that. Not at all. I think it's actually great that they did this. But if you have to contain an extractive system, the only way you can do it is with restrictions and regulations. This is basically bringing a lot of things to standstill, but the fundamental thought behind these regulations is actually brilliant. Our energy system, of course, is highly extractive, as we know, and if we think about technology and digital technology, these companies are seriously extractive. Actually, they're extractive against us human beings. They take our data, they make us addicted, they destroy the brains of our children, and they're hugely profitable. And we're all amazed by these so-called platform companies. If we look at the primary sector, let's look at agriculture. The primary sector is where the raw materials are coming from. And the industrial sector is actually organized, highly mechanized, as you know, and it's a monoculture. And if you look at a monoculture, what you see here is a cornfield. And in this cornfield, between the rows of the corn, you see a lot of empty space. You actually see a lot of barren ground. And what happens to this barren ground? If there is a blank earth, what happens is there are plants coming and they try immediately to cover that ground. Because if you tear off the plants from a ground, it's like I'm tearing you off your skin. But we don't like these plants in the system. We actually call them weeds. And we use herbicides to spray them away because they make the efficiency of our agriculture, they destroy the efficiency of our agriculture. So we then have the insects who attack these monocultures because they don't like them. They think they're sick, they're not diverse. They want to kill them so that diversity can come back. And then we have the fungi who are trying to do the same. And for each of these, we have the insecticides, we have the fungicides. In the United States, they put 1.5 pounds of poison per person out on these fields. You remember the symbiosis between the animals and the plants? We're putting the plants in containment. That's a feeding lot in the United States with thousands of cattle. And we feed these cattle corn, which they cannot digest because they actually want to live on grass. So we have to give them antibiotic, and imagine the concentration of manure and antibiotic in the groundwater that this is doing. These are the most intelligent animals on this planet, and they have a very sensitive nose, but we put them in containment on pits where the manure is right below them. They're literally living on their shit. And these are the sanitizing troops of nature. They are picking all the germs and the larvae, and they clean the place. We put them in big containments, and we tell our children, don't come too close to these big containments because the germs that are coming out of there are actually dangerous. This is extractive forestry. This is a clear cut, and these clear cuts are happening all over the world. And basically what these clear cuts do is you remember the relationship of the mother tree with the community of trees. Of course, it's destroying these communities. It is actually causing a huge release of carbon dioxide because the mycorrhizal fungi and all the soil life is dying and is going up into the air. This is like a wound. This is basically destroying the water cycle. What we do to the soil is basically destroying the soil carbon cycle. By the way, we have destroyed 50% of all the humus in the soil. And we estimate that 20 to 30% of the carbon dioxide, Anthropocene carbon dioxide in the earth is originating from us destroying the soils. And here we are destroying the water cycle. You remember the picture I showed you, the simulation I showed you with the Amazon rainforest, the pump. This is basically one of the heart chambers. And what you see here is the deforestation of the Amazon. And in the year, I think it's 2012, I can't see it, it was the low point. And the low point was still 4,000 square kilometers, 4,000 meters, 4,000 kilometers by 1 kilometer in 1 year. I don't know how many of you have been at Iguazu waterfalls. I'm sure you remember them a little bit differently than on this picture. This picture was taken in 2023. You remember that the water pump was basically bringing the water down into the south between Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo, and that's where the Iguazu waterfalls are. The water cycle is not working anymore. The heart pump is not working anymore. It's actually either not sending water or it's sending too much water. We have streamlined our rivers. The water system we have created, the water comes down as rainfall, it goes into the gutter, it goes into the sewage, it goes into the river, and we are bringing the water out as fast as we can. We're literally drying out our continents. We don't have a lack of rainfall. We have a water system which is basically taking the water out of the land, and there are scientists who are saying this is a major cause of climate change. We're putting dams into the rivers, huge dams. I don't know if you would like to have a dam in your Wien. And we love nature. And I'm sure if you see this picture, you love these flowers. It opens your heart. But we are trying to preserve nature at certain places. We call these natural parks. And in the rest of the area, we continue as we do. So here you see a flower stripe in a wheat field, and left and right, he continues to spray with glyphosate and insecticides, and yeah, that's what is happening here. So conservation is separation. If you look at the secondary sector, we still have mainly a linear value chain. If you look at the OECD countries, 30% is recycled, 70% is ending in dumps and incinerators. And the 30% are actually downcycled. So we cannot maintain the level of quality of material. And what you see here is a huge dump of, in fact, clothes. In the Atacama Desert in Chile, it was discovered. In the meantime, you don't find it anymore because once it was discovered, people burned it. Yeah. We have still planned obsolescence. The washing machine should break down after 8 years because we want to sell another washing machine. If you think about how this material is being used, probably not such a good idea. And I was a big fan of globalization. And but then I saw David Attenborough's film, and in this film he's showing what happened in Borneo. Borneo is 2.5 times the size of Germany, and it's an island in Indonesia, and it's the habitat of the orangutan. And 50% of the most diversified rainforest after the Amazon has been clear-cut, and we planted oil palm plantations. You remember the picture with the accounting system, and most of that palm oil is actually consumed by us. So I'm not so sure if globalization really was a good idea, because we here still think everything is in order, but we don't see what's happening in all those countries that deliver the raw materials to us. We created human rights. It was first in the American Constitution, I think 1788, Declaration of Independence. It was a brilliant idea, and if you look at maps, you see that there's still many, many red countries in the world where human rights are still not managed very well, and they're currently deteriorating at quite a speed. Could it be that these things are somehow connected? These people, the indigenous people, they are the people who are still connected to the living system. They consider the plants and the animals to being their brothers and sisters. And we're doing a pretty good job in more and more getting them extinct. They can help us. There are areas in the Amazon which are managed by indigenous people, and you can see it on satellite maps where there's suddenly a very healthy patch of rainforest, and around it deforestation is taking place. The distribution of global wealth is, frankly speaking, insane. 1% is close to 50% of the wealth, 12% is now in the range of 85%. This is simply not sustainable. The democracy index of the Economist is basically deteriorating also. More and more democracies who were full democracies turned into so-called flawed democracies. If you look at the science and the education, we are still very much in this reductionist mode. It's changing, but the science is still in the ivory towers. They can often not communicate with each other. We need to enforce interdisciplinarity much more. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a degenerative spiral. And climate change is basically the fever of the living system. And the extinction of the species is simply because the way we act within the living system. If we're all business people, we like to see numbers. What you see here is, you can find this in the internet, are indicators of what's happening on Earth system trends and socioeconomic trends. And what is interesting is, basically in the 1950s, these curves go all exponential. And so we are basically in a race against the wall. So, sorry for telling you this very depressing story. I think we probably have to go through this to hopefully come up with the right solution. And I think there is a business case. So we have to get out of this declining spiral. If anyone in this room thinks that our economies are growing, they're definitely not growing. If you take into account what's happening to the natural capital on this planet, all our economies are in decline. And so what do? We need to move to a regenerative paradigm. Sustainability is not good enough. We have destroyed 50% of the biomass on this planet. 77% of the wilderness is gone. We need to regenerate. We need to regenerate the living system. And that's actually not so difficult, because nature is actually quite adaptable, and it helps us if we do the right things. And the very simple answer I have to what's the business case is simply, we need a business case where we align with the universal principles of life. We cannot go on like this. We fundamentally need a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift has to be quite radical. And I think we are in this period of transformation. At the moment, it's the old forces against the new forces. It's an ongoing battle. I'm an optimist, and I think we will move in this direction. We have, and the simple idea behind this is, we need to build a system that respects the law of nature, which is giving and receiving. And that requires that we have to rethink the law. We need to introduce the rights of nature. And I would call them the rights of life. And we human beings are part of it. Our human rights are part of this rights of life. Read this book, you will be surprised. A lot is going on in the world in this direction. We have the first rivers who have been defined as legal entities. They own themselves. We have that with mountains. We have that with national parks. We are more and more understanding how intelligent this living system is, and we need to respect it. We need the rights of nature. And I was complaining about all the bureaucracy. I think we need a new legal approach. Let's throw all these rules and laws into the dustbin. And let's start with plain level fields. Let's set the boundaries clear. And let's say in 20 years, no fossil fuels are used anymore. In 20 years, no pesticides are used anymore, ideally in 10 years. Let's define a plain level field where we have some rules and where we have clear borderlines. And then let us entrepreneurs and investors do our job. That's what I think. This is the kind of legal revolution we need. And the boundary of this plain level field are the principles of life. And we need, of course, to include the externalities in our accounting. This is an example of a German retailer who is showing the real cost of this cheese. He's actually defining where the hidden costs are coming from. We need to move to a true costing accounting. It's urgently needed. Just the externality costs of the food system are, according to UN estimates, between 12 and 17 trillion per year. So what does that mean? We have to include all these externalities, and we have to calculate what's the real profit of a business. And, you know, the CSRD guidelines are great, and having attachment to our annual accounts and explaining all the things we're doing. But it's not enough. It has to end up in our P&L. It has to end up in our balance sheet. Imagine the revolution in innovation we would have if we would create a plain level field where all the externalities are finally being accounted for. We know about them for more than 130 years. It was a scientist called Marshall and later Pigou who actually made us aware of the so-called externalities. We need to have a natural capital account in our GDP accounting. We need to have a human capital account, and if it would be up to me, it would be just a natural capital account, including the humans. We need to stop being blindfolded. We simply don't see what we're doing. Not in this room, but if you look at the PE dry powder, at the moment it's $4 trillion on a global level. I don't know how much it is in Europe. This is a lot of money coming from pensioners. Where do you want to invest this money? In this extractive system or in a system that actually regenerates life? We have to harness the power of the sun, and we do it. We have to do more of it. I yesterday met a very nice startup who is actually exactly doing this. They can do it on your roof. They can do it on the facade. I would like that all roofs finally become solar panels. And forget it if it's an ancient building. Let's put them on all roofs. And don't please put them on our agricultural land. We need a revolution in innovation and technology. I will talk about it in a second, but the kind of farming that I envision needs a lot of technology. I yesterday sat with entrepreneurs who are in the battery business, and a lot of innovations is needed there. We need to find new materials that don't use as much energy as our materials use, like concrete and cement. There are ideas to do it with bacteria, which are actually quite amazing. So there is a lot already there, and it would just explode if we set the rules right. We need to collaborate. We need to participate. The law of collaboration. This is a picture from Canton Glarus in Switzerland, where they still come together. It's the smallest canton in Switzerland to vote. We need to sit around the table. We have to take off our armor and just fight for our needs and our interests. We need to envision a world that works differently. We need to bring our children into school gardens. Every school, every university should have a school garden. And science has to get together. We need interdisciplinarity to move things forward. Regenerative agriculture, that's how my journey started. It is basically focusing on the soil. It is about rebuilding the soil, the womb. And to do that, it maximizes photosynthesis over a hectare of land. And it's doing that by creating diversity. So this is a way of farming that is much more diversified. And it's following certain rules. They are minimize soil disturbance, maximize crop diversity, keep the soil covered, maintain living roots in the soil, and integrate livestock. Stop the plowing. Do it every 5 years if it's necessary, but stop the plowing. That's just basically throwing up the soil carbon, and it oxidizes and goes up in the air. Direct seeding. Seed into the armored soil, directly into the plants. It's all happening. It's all working. It's nothing new. Maximize the diversity. You see here these plants and the different root lengths. So that exudates the carbon at all the horizons in the soil. Keep the soil covered. You remember the picture with the corn, left and right corn? This is a catch crop. That is basically once you harvest the corn, the catch crop is coming up. So there's always armor on the ground. We need to keep the soil covered year around. If you are in the United States in the wintertime, you see still millions of hectares of land not covered, barren soil. Symbiosis of plants and herbivores. You remember the symbiosis? There are farmers who have introduced a way of farming called mob grazing, where these cattle actually spend a day on a paddock, and then they leave this paddock, and the paddock is kept idle for 6 to 8 weeks so the grass can recover. And that's a very effective way. It actually causes your grass productivity to increase significantly, because that's how it is happening in nature. The herds go through, and then they don't come back for a long time, and the grass recovers. It brings the soil pump, the carbon soil pump into motion, and that's why the savannas and the prairies are the regions with the highest humus level, soil carbon level in the world. Mob grazing on the left, stock grazing on the right. 99% of the grazing on this planet is still stock grazing. This is causing deserts in semi-arid regions. We don't see it here yet because we are not in these kind of climate situations. Agroforestry, that's the way to introduce the forest into the agriculture. We need permanent forests, forests that are well stratified with a lot of leaves on all levels, of trees of all ages, highly diversified. Permanent forest doesn't mean we don't cut the trees, but we cut them tree by tree, no clear cuts. We need to keep the water in the land. We have to completely change our water management. We need to rewild and connect our landscapes again. We need to bring back the hedgerows. We had them all. We cut them in the 50s because we were told it's more efficient and we should use the land better for our industrial agriculture. We need a circular economy. Products need to be designed differently. They need to... we have all the means of doing it, but we are not forced to do it. We need to have not compounded materials because you can't recycle them so well. We need to tell companies to take their products back. Imagine the kind of innovation they would find to make all these materials as disposable as possible and recyclable. Use a ship in lifetime. Drive now. You use the car for whenever you need and you put it back on the street. Imagine an automobile producer, would he still build in planned obsolescence? No, he would maximize the lifetime of this car because that maximizes cash flow he gets out of this car. We need to change the food chains. We have to localize the food chains. We have to go local again. 60% of the fruit and vegetables in the United States come all from California and are shipped to the East Coast. And then they spend 4, 5, 6 weeks in containment, and the vitamins and the nutrition value is gone. We have to reinvent our cities. Paris is trying to do it with the 15-minute city. We have to localize our energy supply. We have the possibility now to do that with solar. We have to go much more local. We need to go global. A lot of things still make, of course, only sense on a global level, but a lot of things make much more sense on the local level. You remember this apple tree. We at Regenerate are actually doing this project at Lake Constance. And Lake Constance is a very interesting place because it's surrounded by 4 countries, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and if you count little Liechtenstein as a country as well. It's the largest freshwater lake in Middle Europe. It's a highly important source of drinking water. And the starting point looks like this. Doesn't look so bad, but it's a lot of monoculture. But what we want is a climate landscape, a cooling climate landscape. And what we need for that is water retention. We need diversification in terms of how we produce our food. We spoke about regenerative agriculture. We want to have connected landscapes. We want to have the hedgerows coming back and the forests being connected. We want to have mob grazing. We want to have renewable energy, of course, decentralized in the region. And we want to have food crafts back. The food crafts are gone. The butcher, the baker, it has all been industrialized and centralized. We did a retreat where we brought the farmers and the entrepreneurs of the region together, and they studied the soil. And I can tell you, if you bring an entrepreneur on a regenerative farm, it is blowing his mind. A German entrepreneur, a very well-known one, once told me, in every entrepreneur is a farmer. We are creating roundtables of farmers. We provide professional moderation. We do this also with communities. We are doing it actually in a district at Lake Constance called Bodenseekreis that has 23 communities, and we bring all the stakeholders around the table to envision the climate landscape of the future. And we are actually creating a refinancing platform with startups like Land Banking Group, Regionalwert, and Green Zero, where actually the local businesses pay for the ecosystem services that the farmers hopefully do by moving towards regenerative practices. This is a crazy project. I don't know where we will be. I just recently was at a startup conference in Wageningen, and there was a presentation by EIT Food. That's an European institution, and I couldn't believe it. They are now promoting to do this in 10 regions in Europe, and of course, we are in discussions because financing this project is very, very difficult. Ladies and gentlemen, if you touch your heart And you saw these pictures I showed you. Sorry for doing that. But I'm sure every one of you feels the pain. Accept the pain. Get close to this pain. We need a new consciousness. We cannot go on like this. The people in this room, they can change the world if we work together. And we need to move to this new paradigm. We need to realign with the living system. We need to reconnect. This picture is a very famous picture. It is actually the last picture that was taken by the Voyager satellite. Some of you might know that he actually came back to life. And there's this pale blue dot. That was a picture of Earth. That's here. That's us. That's home. Let's do it. Thank you.